Today's podcast is supported by Accordions, our headline partner for PRWeek's inaugural Corporate Affairs Awards. Accordions was built to help complex global businesses manage reputation and relationships during key moments of change. They bring together 4 award-winning agencies, Grayling, Citygate Dew Rogerson, Circle and the Red Consultancy to offer deep expertise, uniquely combined across the globe. Head to www.accordions.com or get in touch at hello@accordions.com. Hello and welcome to Noise in Brief, the podcast series from PRWeek. I'm news editor Siobhan Holt and your host today. I'm joined by PRWeek UK editor John Harrington and reporter Eliza Wiredu. Hi team.
Hi Sean.
Hello.
So tonight is fun and frolics for us. We're at the Brand Film Awards, which is being held at the Ham Yard Hotel in London. Very fancy venue. Are you guys looking forward to it?
Definitely.
Certainly am. Yeah. Ham Yard's great. We were there for the Influencer 360 event a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, great success.
Yeah, lovely sort of great atmosphere, lovely sort of cinema style seating and lots of glams.
Appropriate for brand film then.
Appropriate for brand film. Just good to be in Soho as well.
Yes.
I think it's, central location and lots of good times.
Yeah, we're going to be recognising the outstanding creativity and storytelling in branded content. And it's not our first awards. We had one last Tuesday as well.
Yes.
So it's been a busy old week. That was for our inaugural Corporate Affairs Awards, which was sponsored by Accordions. And that celebrated the best of the best across corporate comms, financial PR, healthcare and public affairs. And it took place at the fancy Quaglinos. What's it famous for, John? Now you know.
Something in a scene of something I haven't seen. And if everyone was saying, "Oh, this isn't that where that thing happens."
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's really funny. Oh, did he? And I was like, I don't know.
For those who don't know, he's talking about the Scene in One Day, which is the Netflix drama that's been very popular.
Yeah, not in my household.
Fair enough. But yeah, Danny and I were enjoying the view. Unfortunately, Eliza wasn't with us, were you, Eliza? Because it was so sold out.
I'm very jealous, but there's always next year.
Absolutely.
Exactly. But thank you everyone who took part.
Yeah, it was a great night. We had loads of entries. As we say, it was a busy old event. And we had Jenny Hall, who was the chair from Corporate Affairs Director at Royal Mail, and Katie McMillan, the Senior Director for Global Corporate Affairs and Sustainability at AstraZeneca, were our judges. So thank you to all the judges, though, and all the who entered. It was well-deserved.
Yeah. Well, Jenny and Katie were chaired the judging, so that's a particular sort of responsibility for them. But, loads of work gone in by all of the judges, across in-house and agency. Is really good to see such a mix of people getting involved and everyone, having a nice time because, this has been a difficult period. But
it has.
It feels like the sort of start of award season, really, to me.
Absolutely. Were there any that sort of stood out to you, John, of the winners?
Yeah, I was having a look through, obviously some of the winners and lots to say, really. We could spend the whole...
We could, yeah. We did try
massively
to narrow
overrun
it down.
if we tried to talk about all the interesting things we saw, but I'm just going to pick out a few that I saw. I mean, I really think it was interesting to see, and, obviously every podcast has to mention AI these days, it's the law, but there was really interesting use of that kind of tech kind of combined with traditional methods that I saw sort of throughout. I mean, Weber Shandwick, for example, the integrated agency winner, they were talking about their proprietary reputation intelligence suite that sort of uses AI, which was introduced last year, alongside other things like an advisory board. And I really got the sense from them that the industry and agencies like Weber are kind of combining the new and the old to sort of, produce great results for clients. So that was something that stood out for me. Another couple of things, the lobbying was interesting. The Say Pants to the Tax campaign by Marks and Spence was really interesting to see an individual company sort of leading a lobbying campaign. This was to end the 20% VAT on period pants. It was kind of leading it, but sort of really galvanising a united industry response, really, and putting rivalries to one side. So that's always good to see, because usually the winners in these campaigns wouldn't be individual companies. There would be trade bodies or charities or campaign groups. So I think it was good to see that. I've got a few more, but I think we need to hear someone else's voice.
Yeah, go on, Eliza. Which stood out to you when you had a look at the winners?
So I think my favourite category was the crisis and issue management, which was won by London Luton Airport. For those of you who don't know, the car park at the airport basically caught on fire, and when anything happens at an airport, there's always a lot of stress, especially for people flying out, people working there. This saga kind of went on for almost 3 weeks, but despite the negative press coverage, within a few weeks, all of this had been like swept under the rug. And I think it's an important step for like owning the narrative and like dampening down on like terror attacks. What about you, Siobhan? What do you think?
For me, I think what stood out to me being at this ceremony was for the award for Professional of the Year for Agency and Public Affairs. It was awarded to Sian Jones, who's one of Graylin's Public Affairs directors, and she heads up its Welsh Public Affairs practice. She won it for growing Graylin's business in Westminster and Wales. The nomination said that she'd achieved some of the biggest policy wins in her patch for the agency, including securing a $26 million investment in a Wales free port, as well as landmark brands such as Public Health Wales. But I think what stood out for me was she was being praised for offering a bilingual public affairs offer, which was part of Graylin's written proposals and pitches. And I think that to me really stood out as something that's going that extra mile and making sure that you're being really inclusive when it comes to your pitching. And for me, that I thought was a really worthy winner on the night. So congrats, Sian.
Yeah, great. Another thing, actually, I was going to flag up. Internal comms and employee engagement maybe gets a bit less publicity than other types of comms, but there's some really interesting stuff happening at the moment, and you can see this in the winner of the internal comms and employee engagement category, which is Tesco, which worked with Teneo. They basically put together a 2-hour kind of magazine show for the internal audience called Winning Together, kind of taking inspiration from shows like The One Show. It featured a live studio audience, interestingly, and looked at issues like how Tesco is working with shoppers, communities, and sustainability efforts and so on. I really think it kind of shows how far internal comms has come. The idea that, you would have something along those lines for an internal audience, I think 5-10 years ago, would anyone have considered that to be a realistic thing to do? I don't think so. So I think, shout out to the good work being done in internal comms at the moment. I think that's a really good example of innovation there.
Absolutely. And obviously we do have to say one of the big winners on the night was Specsavers campaign with Golan and Virgo Health. Yeah, that seemed to sweep the board, which doesn't surprise many, I'm sure.
Yeah, great campaign. We've spoken about it a few times before. Will it win others? Will it win in other awards coming up? Watch this space.
Yeah, maybe we should start taking bets now.
Yeah.
Ahead of can. Okay, I think this is a good point actually to mention some of our other awards coming up in the next few weeks. First, we have the PRWeek Global Awards, which is taking place on Wednesday the 15th of May, which brings together the global PR industry to celebrate individuals, teams and organisations. There's also the Purpose Awards, which recognise campaigns that use creative ideas successfully to further positive causes. Held in partnership with our sister titles Campaign and Third Sector, the ceremony will take place on Friday the 7th of June at the London Hotel in London's Leicester Square. Check out the events section of the PRWeek website for more information and to book your tickets. We'll return to talk about Taylor Swift, but first some quick messages. Welcome back. We'll talk about Taylor Swift in a moment. Just hold your horses, people. But first, John, you're going to talk about mergers and acquisitions.
Yes, well, we can't shake off the impact of mergers and acquisitions in the industry. That's the only, I don't know any other things from Taylor Swift. So I'm going to stop talking about Taylor Swift for now and talk about M&A. So basically, M&A hasn't gone away in the industry at any point really in the last few years, but it definitely feels like we're seeing the rate of mergers and acquisitions accelerate in recent weeks. And we've had some really interesting stories, and it seems to be happening in another number of forms. We've had the merger of sister agencies, most notably Buchanan, the financial PR specialist, becoming part of Burson, its sister agency, ahead of obviously the formation of Burson officially in July from the merger of BCW and Hill and Knowlton.
It's getting bigger and bigger.
Getting bigger and bigger. Who's next? On a smaller level, but still an interesting one, Unity, an agency that will be well known to readers of PRWeek in the last sort of 5, 10, 15 years really. A former kind of multi-award winning agency has been merged into Greentarget, which is another financial comms firm, and both are part of the marketing group Selby Anderson. Other forms of M&A we've seen have been kind of in minority investments. And Williams Nicholson, which is a really interesting agency launched in 2021. That's just had some new investment from Next Practices Group, which is the US investor in comms and marketing businesses. And NPG managing partner David Gallagher, some of you will know from Omnicom and Ketchum back in the day. He told me the group is in active conversations about more acquisitions in the UK and is also looking further afield. On this point, Seven Communications was among the agencies that sold a stake to the experiential group called We Are Collider. With both Williams Nicholson and Seven, the idea here is to work more closely with their new partner agencies for mutual benefit. And very briefly, because I know I'm going on a little bit, we're also seeing comms agencies buy up other businesses to expand their own offer. And there was one that happened in recent days. LCW Medical Communications, obviously a specialist in that sector, has bought clinical training and GP education provider Mediconf UK for that reason. So lots going on. It'd be good to let's have a bit of a chat about this. What do you think these pieces of news tell us about M&A in public relations at the moment?
I think agencies are looking to bolster their services and capabilities. I feel like the wider your range of services will kind of link to the broader range of capabilities you'll be able to offer. And I feel like it kind of brings together two networks, which is quite nice. I think having a bigger network can be good because that always means growth. You may be able to tap into new markets that you've not been in before. However, I've spoken to a few people and there's like fears of redundancies because when mergers happen, some people may be in the same role and it's like a bit competitive to see who will keep that role. And I think it's a little bit uncertain as well because you don't know if the values of the agency you joined or the organization you joined will change or if they'll stay the same. So you don't know how you will fit into that new business model.
Yeah. And there was obviously sad news last week about Burson talking about redundancies that are happening as part of that merger, and obviously our thoughts go out to people affected by that and any other sort of redundancies and difficulties at the moment because there was a lot of this, last year. I don't think there's going to be quite as much this year overall, but there's still clearly some of those sort of programs going on. So that is one element to this. But no, I agree. I mean, I think you got to look to any advantage. And it does look to me as though some agencies see genuine advantage in being part of these wider groups and be able to collaborate with other like-minded agencies that perhaps have slightly different specialisms or operate in slightly different geographical markets. So, yeah, I think it's positive. It's also a sign that, investors think there's money to be made in this industry, think that this is a good investment opportunity. So I think that's another thing that we should be hopeful of when it comes to particularly sort of outside investors and especially private equity. And I know we haven't really spoken about private equity so far, but that is also, in recent months and years been a big feature of M&A in this sector. So not to say that these things are easy and, they're not. And there's no simple way, I think, of getting these things to work. And you mentioned culture and changing values and that kind of thing. I think that is really important to bear in mind. But there's a lot to be said for the sort of changing nature of the sort of agency landscape.
It's a lot more integration going on across the board, really, isn't there? And we've seen it for a while as well. End of last year, was it Freud's bought a creative agency?
Yeah.
So there's that element of development in other territories that they're sort of looking at. And as you say, expansion into Europe, it offers a whole new remit.
Well, that's it. It could be geographical expansion. It can be sort of services expansion. And you mentioned Freud's acquisition a couple of months ago, MHP Group. They had a similar one where they bought Studio La Plage. Always remember that name. Always sticks in my mind.
It's a great name, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. So, yeah, I think, and that shows the sort of the desire for sort of, if you like, the kind of content creation element and the sort of creativity being sort of merged into all of this as well, which probably links to Brand Film Awards, and how that's such a good celebration of that sort of thing. But it's definitely an element that agencies across the industry, far from just being something that consumer agencies are into, it's very much something that all kinds of agencies want to up their game there.
And finally, let's talk about Taylor Swift and her comms prowess. So, as everyone knows, I don't even need to explain this, but last week, Taylor Swift took over the world. I think not even just the internet. She took over the world with the announcement of her new album, which is called The Tortured Poets Department. She took to Twitter to make the announcement, and then she released the first album, but then little did her fans know that 2 hours later she'll be posting again at 2 a.m. with a surprise second instalment. I think it ended up being nearly something like 30 songs in total. She gave a message at the time when the 15 extra songs were launched that now the story isn't mine anymore, it's all yours, which, again, great comms from Taylor. The album is thought to reference recent breakups with actor Joe Alwyn and the 1975 musician Matt Healy, as well as her current relationship with NFL American footballer Travis Kelce. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about her comms prowess. So what do you think, Eliza? Let's start with you. Do you think she's an expert comms?
I think when you think of the Taylor brand, you think of the Taylor Swift as the person. She's kind of become synonymous with the idea of herself. I think her real skill in communication is the way she's able to like foster parasocial relationships. When fans listen to her speak, it's kind of like listening to your older sister talk to you or listening to your friend talk to you. It's quite vulnerable, it's quite honest. And in that regard, I think she is amazing, especially with how she communicates with some of her songs. However, I must say, I don't think Taylor Swift is as great as a communicator as everyone says she is. I would go as far as to say she's only really a good communicator to millennial white women. Okay. According to Statistica in the USA in 2023, a large share of Taylor Swift's fans were white, and I think that was about 74%. 13% were black, and only 9% were Asian. So looking at it from a whole like demographic standpoint, she isn't really the best communicator to people of color, which isn't a problem. Like, that can happen. But I think where things start to get a little bit muddled is in her recent album, she kind of sings a line that mentions 1800s but without slavery and getting married, and it's really tone deaf. And I've heard so much discourse about that online, saying no one else would say this and no one else would get away with saying this. But I feel like through the power of her fans, they're quite protective of her. And I think her fans also help her communication strategy, because whenever there's negative press about Taylor or something's not quite right, they're always very quick to defend her and keep her brand identity whole.
We actually interviewed a few members of the industry about this, or Swifties, as they declared themselves. And Doug McPherson, who is an associate director at Mischief, he described Taylor as queen of hype, which I thought was a great way of sort of covering her skill. And Emma Franklin Wright, who is director at H&K, she said that Taylor's approach is quite different from maybe, say, Kate Moss's, which is never complain, never explain, a bit similar to the Royals when it comes to her attitude of communications. But Taylor's ethos seems to be explain absolutely everything, but make people work for it and make sure that they're racking up her Spotify minutes while they're figuring it out. So rather than giving away things in interviews, she sort of said her approach instead is put it all in the music, so it's driving all her fan base to that to find out information. And I thought that was a really interesting angle of Taylor's comms approach.
Yeah, I think it sort of reminds me of when Prince Harry's book came out.
Yes.
It was like, it's almost like you can imagine, you know, when that happens, the reporters would be given, you know, a chat in many newspapers I heard were given like a chapter each or whatever it was. And it's like, right, write a story from that, find the story from that.
Yeah.
You could almost imagine a similar thing happen. It's like, right, you take songs 1 to 3, you take,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? And just sort of really dig into it and try. And I've never known anything like that before. I mean, it's not like news stories from songs is new in itself. I mean, the kind of diss track is kind of a publicity machine for a long time, and it sells, it generates publicity and generates interest. But I don't think anything on this scale I've never known before.
No, I'd agree. And in the past as well, we've definitely had bands, ABBA, Fleetwood Mac, that have had relationships going on behind the scenes that we've all been interested in. But this seems to be phenomenal. And I think you're right, the obsession with SEO of really investigating on all the lyrics, searching for possible stories, has been phenomenal this weekend.
Yeah, it really has. There's a weird situation with the pub in Vauxhall, isn't there?
Yes.
The Black Dog pub that's apparently referenced in one of the songs, and then they've just got loads of Swifties going for a Swift half.
Yep.
No,
nice.
You don't feel you need to laugh. It's fine. Try my
Nothing
best.
from Eliza there.
No, you're right. Didn't deserve it. I don't care.
I think what I find interesting on that point is when she does release new albums or multiple of the same album, she always puts in something new.
Yeah.
So you're not buying the exact same copy. Maybe you'll have a different song on it, or she'll send in a special message. She's done that with some of her other albums in the past. And I think that way she kind of gets people to invest in her a little bit more. Like, you've got the normal album, and then you've got the deluxe album, and then you've got the platinum album, and then you kind of have to keep up with it to see, has she released something new?
It's proper fandom, isn't it? It's a sort of, when we were talking about this yesterday, I sort of made a comparison to George Lucas, like constantly updating versions of Star Wars. And it's like, right, now the CGI is good enough to have like a freestanding Jabba the Hutt. So this feels like, I don't want to stretch this analogy too far.
No.
But it's kind of like you can keep tweaking and like creating this, almost just this expanded Taylor Swift universe where if you wanted to go deeper into these things and go into the lore of LORE of this part of her life, then you can do that, which actually is really good, because that is, I guess, part of fandom. It's just about going really in depth and finding out all of the sort of the bits that you don't hear first off. So.
Yeah, and one of the other people that I interviewed also said that they thought that she's actually broadened it out as well. By some of the collaborations she's done on this album, she's actually expanded it, so it's not just Gen Z fans that are maybe interested, it's also broadened out to millennial, and they compared it to the Six Music crowd, bringing them into the Swiftie community, and I thought that was a great way of putting it. But I suppose it's true, you've got to think of these things as a communicator. How do you keep your existing fans happy but also appeal to others? And I thought that was, maybe it's a really clever way of doing it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, how long has she been around for in terms of a recording artist? 15
over
years?
50 years?
Yeah, she started very young.
She started when she was 16, and she came out with her first country album.
So she would have some fans now who weren't born when she effectively started as a recording
Potentially,
artist.
Yeah.
Or certainly very young.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think keeping on top of those kind of trends and keeping your music sort of relevant to people of different generations is a real skill, I would have thought.
Yeah.
She does that on TikTok, so I'm not sure if you know, but TikTok, Universal Music Group, basically removed a bunch of royalties of TikTok because they were having licensing issues. However, Taylor Swift owns her music. She's under the group, but she owns her music, so she's able to let the TikTok platform use it. So when the album launched, I saw a bunch of videos on my TikTok For You page with her songs, and I think with the way TikTok works, if you don't know what a song is, you can just click the button and then add it to your Spotify or add it to your Apple Music, and then it creates a great way of just keeping up to date with the artist. And I think through social media as well, she's quite effective in doing so.
I would agree she's very, very strong. And I'm taking that off how many people, when we surveyed as part of the Power Book, mentioned her. I mean, it was a phenomenal response from the industry. So I think I speak on behalf of a lot of them that say that she is.
Fair enough.
That's it for this week's podcast. Thanks to John and Eliza for your thoughts and insight on this week's episode. Before we go, I'd like to quickly promote the PRWeek UK Awards. That's our biggest awards event of the year, so don't miss out. Get your entries in today. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review wherever you access your podcasts. Noise and Brief goes live every 2 weeks, but in the meantime, you can check out our longer interview-based podcast, Beyond the Noise, which comes out next week. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.